Late Night Pod is up on a Tuesday. We're back. Soren Petro's here, special guest tonight. The one, the only, John Von Tobel. Fired up about that. John, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm watching this Dodgers game, hoping that they win by 2 or more runs. Doing a little bit of writing, so it's going well.
Did you really make a run line bet?
Why, is he anti-run lines or something?
I think we're all anti-run line, but the prices down the stretch here are so crazy that I guess if you don't want to lay 300, 350, you got no choice. I think John's mic is messing with him a little bit. It happens. Oh, no, we can't hear. Oh, he's muted somehow.
There we go. We're going to have to go old school on this.
And then how about Cofield? Talks his trash and then he immediately disappears.
And then his internet craps out on him.
And then he dies. That is absolutely classic Cofield.
It's pretty good.
Take his shots and then he's going. What a dumbass.
What a rough beginning. What a rough beginning. You know what's funny? The other day on the show, God, I'm trying to think what I gaffed. Oh, I know what I did. So we play some highlights of the Raiders coming in, and Brent Musburger's old, so he's not as sharp as he used to be. And he called Eric Ingold on a touchdown, and I just made I did like very subtle, like something about Eric Ingold, and then within a half an hour, I tried to make some point about we were talking about the football team, Washington, and we were talking about the back end of their defense, and I mentioned something about Landon Collins, and I was like, oh, that stuff's going on off the field with the bribe and this and that, and then we go to break, and Adam Candy's like, it's Lyle Collins. Like, it's not the same. I'm like, oh, there you go. So Brent's like 82. I'm 51 going on 82. So it generally happens. When I mock on someone, I make the same mistake or something similar within like five minutes.
If you haven't realized that you just go with the Jeopardy scoring system of last names only,
yep,
to not embarrass your dumb old ass at this point, Steve, I don't know who can help you.
I am so bad on first names. I know you've been bad for a while, but I'm so
I've been bad since Vegas. I've been bad since the 90s.
Yeah. Good, John.
I was going to say that my claim to fame was in Butch. Was it Butch? Who's the old Tennessee coach? Butch Jones.
Butch Jones.
My thing is I talk too fast, and so there was one point where Humans and I were on the air, and I called him Bitch Jones. Yeah, I called him Bitch Jones. Yeah,
Bitch Jones.
My best one I ever had was, and Chuck Powell works at KJR in Seattle, and I were doing a show together at the time, and he just started laughing and just kept letting me go. You're probably not old enough, Von Tobel, but when the Mavericks were really good back in like the Roy Tarpley days, and Derek Harper, and I think maybe the end toward the downstretch of Ro Blackman and Detlef Schrempf, their backup center, and he eventually got traded to the Knicks, was a guy named James Donaldson. And for an entire segment, I called him Sam Donaldson, which again, I may have to explain to you, was like one of the lead guys on 60 Minutes. And so I had Sam, he's like, tell me again what you think about Sam Donaldson. And he just kept, throwing me under the bus. I'm like, oh, dude, he's like 280. Like, think about it. You got Roy Tarpley wheeling and dealing on you. Then Donaldson comes in, or they play him together, and you got this 290-pound center, Sam Donaldson, do this. He's like, yeah, Sam does it. I go, oh, yeah, stupid ass. Chuck Powell's a big Richard. That's the bottom line right there. Screw that guy. By the way, if you sit there any longer, mouth breathing, with that look of like stupidity on your face, Steve, I'm going to either wonder whether you froze up or you're having some kind of fit.
Well, here's the thing. No one's seeing it, so it doesn't matter. Because I'm looking on our count for who's watching, and for some reason, Facebook and Twitter, like it linked out on Twitter, but not one person's watching on Twitter, which means there's something wrong. So let's see.
I just got done doing our Red, White, and True football podcast.
Right.
And Eric could see that we had, however many people. I could not. I don't know how to do that. So,
I mean, whatever you got to tell yourself to make yourself feel better about the numbers.
We had 1.7 million people viewing us at one time, Steve, as far as you know. I'm going to go with that. That's the kind of juice we carry.
Now Brady's saying the feed died, but here's the thing: we switched over to Twitter, on my account, it looks like there's a Twitter link. Let me check on this is always good podcast stuff. So
Well, I think you're good because on Twitter it says 40 people are watching. So I'm looking on my phone right now.
So it's not showing the count.
Yeah, you're good.
Thank you, Cam. Cam confirmed that he could see us earlier. So
thanks. Yeah, it is. He could see
us earlier.
So. There you go.
There you go. See, relax, Steve.
I just want to make sure this shit works. I don't want to waste your time.
Listen, my time is not very valuable. Let's be honest.
Well, and let's be clear. I'm doing this for free. So
yeah. Before we get
paid by the viewer, is that the deal? Then Noble and I will actually go ahead and maybe have an F to give. See what.
Did you misidentify? Did you misidentify Sam Donaldson as 60 Minutes instead of ABC?
Yeah. Listen, I had him playing center for the Mavericks, for Christ's sake. Why do you think I'd get the right news deal?
Before we get to leans and likes, I actually wanted to hit on a couple of things I saw Petro discussing.
Oh God.
On his show. Well, first of all, I think Adam Hill retweeted something about Josh Gordon signing and said, "Does he play defense?" And then Adam got a response from someone who was like, you Raider fans, and like that's so laughable to call Adam a Raider fan. Like if he's taking a shot at the Chiefs, it ain't because he's a Raiders fan. So, and then if you saw the tease for this about a half an hour ago, I said we were going to talk about the sad demise of the Chiefs.
Right.
So I don't know if Tony's jumping in here to say protect the city, Petro.
That's right. That's right. That's right, Tony. Listen, I'll walk in slowly, but then I'll beat ass and I'll be the only guy walking out of the ring when it's all said and done. You bet I'll protect the city. I told Adam, by the way, to your point, I said, how about this? Raiders win a few games and suddenly everybody in Vegas has got big balls, or everybody in Vegas is ready to talk some shit or something. I can't remember what I said. And then I put hashtag sarcasm because I know Adam is not.
Yeah, of course.
I'm a bigger Raider fan than Adam.
You are. You're much more freaking rosy on the Raiders situation going back to last year. The funny thing is, I said it today on my station, ESPN Las Vegas. I'm literally the only guy on the air who is like glass half full most of the time on the Raiders. Every game, if they're doing well, every show's theme most of the time is pump the brakes. This isn't real. That's what it is. And they're not wrong because the Raiders do. They've won two.
They may be wrong. Time will tell.
Well, I mean, there are reasons to be concerned. It's a 3-0 start. They're winning games they didn't win last year, so that's positive. But they have major flaws. I mean, it can't continue if some of the units like the offensive line continue to play the way they are. I don't know, John. What do you think? I mean, how do you read the 3-0 start?
I think there's positives and negatives, right? I think offensively there's some legitimacy to it. Like Derek Carr is a really good quarterback. Each of the last 2 seasons, they've been a top 10 team in terms of offensive efficiency. Like those are things that I think are sustainable for them. Carr, I know Soren's deep in the PFF stuff with the PFF guys. Carr's their second highest graded passer so far this year. He's the best passer this year on deep throws, 20 or more yards downfield. He leads the league in big time throws. Like I think all of that's sustainable because I'm really high on Carr. But I also think if you're looking at this defense and thinking that this is legit, they've played 2 of the worst offenses in the NFL. They've played 2 of the worst offensive lines in the NFL. And so there's probably some room, to fall back down to earth. But I think your overall point, Steve, is right, where they're not only are they winning games that they didn't last year, they're showing that they could take advantage of weaknesses of other teams. And I think that is a strength. Like if you're able to take advantage of 2 bad offensive lines in the Baltimore Ravens and the Miami Dolphins, that's a positive. You might not be as good as your numbers dictate, but it's a positive you can take advantage of it.
But let me weigh in on this. Like, how many landmines do you think are out there, right? Like, to their credit, they got it done against the Dolphins. And, it shouldn't have been quite as sticky as it was with a Jacoby Brissett-led team. But, I think the kid's at least tough, and I think guys do respect him on the team, and he had a week to practice, unlike the week before they just got housed. But finding a way to win is important, right? Like grabbing those games, because now, okay, at the Chargers, that's tough, but the Bears, no. At the Broncos, you want to talk about a fraudulent 3-0, 0-9, the 3 teams that they've beaten, right? Eagles, no. At Giants, no. Chiefs, yes. Bengals, let's see. I mean, work in progress, right? At the Cowboys, tougher. Football team, falling apart. At the Chiefs, tough. At the Browns, tough. Broncos, again, what we said before. Colts got problems. And then the Chargers. I mean, that's the whole schedule. Like, by banking these wins, 10-7 seems like, I think barring massive injuries, right? Everybody has injuries, but, you start to feel like 10-7 is the floor, don't you?
Yeah, I would think so. Like 10-7, 11-6 is certainly sustainable. I don't know if it's the floor, but it's definitely a sustainable like peak for them to reach. It's actually I bet Derek Carr 25-1 to win MVP because I think the path is there for him to just have a really big year, for them to win like 10, 11 games, right? And to be a playoff team. And who knows? Look, it's kind of just like not even a math thing, but like the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Do I think the Chiefs are in trouble? No. But if they continue to kind of scuffle along a little bit here, you just run out of real estate to potentially win that division. So all of a sudden, you can find the Raiders stumbling into a division title, like we've seen it from year to year. A team that wins a division or wins 11 or 12 games isn't as strong as they really are. Case in point, the Steelers a year ago, right? They were able to get what was it, 11-0 start. So I think those are perfectly sustainable things. Now, how good are they in terms of winning a Super Bowl? I think we'll find out. But in terms of putting together a really good regular season, that's perfectly possible, I think, for Las Vegas.
What are the crossover games that are different, right? The Chiefs have the Colts, or the Raiders have the Colts, the Chiefs have the Titans. That's doing its job as to what they're supposed to deal with. The crossover NFC game is what they've already beaten the Bears. The Chiefs have to play the Packers, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's a major difference. And then what's the other finisher? They're playing the NFC North would be the Raiders got the Dolphins and the Chiefs have the Pats, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, from that standpoint, like I was just talking about it with Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus and Jeff Jadia from NFL Network, and one of our first topics was like, is it time to panic for the Chiefs? Like, I don't think it's time to panic, and I think they'll circle the wagons, but I don't know that they're. I had them 12-5 all along because I expected a little bit of a regression to the mean, and they won so many close games last year. Like, some balls have to bounce against them, and it's already happened. And maybe these will be the only two, and they'll be 13-4 and still win this division. But there's issues on their defense, and like I still think they'll win the division. But like there are built-in advantages. Those it's 3 games now, not 2. It used to be 4 games that you got to kiss when you were off the schedule, and then when they shuffle it around and went to the 4 to 8 divisions overall, that lessened it because there's only 2 games that was different. But the 17th game makes it 3, and that really can bode well for second, third, and fourth who they get in the matchups. And I think right now on paper it looks like it's going to bode well for the Raiders. Definitely going to bode well for the Broncos. So I'm still pretty bullish on the Raiders.
And let's not forget too, like when it comes to the Chiefs coming back in this division, the Raiders haven't exactly rolled over for them in the last couple of years when they played them head to head. So,
yeah, no, they've had the formula. Like the Chiefs, well, of course they've overhauled the entire offensive line, and it's better. It's still not fantastic, and it might be pretty good when it's all said and done. Right now, it's, again they really got kind of roughed up on the Browns, which is they're carrying those bad grades all the way through, but. The Raiders to me had the blueprint, and the Bucks definitely looked at it in the Super Bowl, and they got pressure at a year that what did the Raiders have, like 12 sacks all year, and they were all over Mahomes in both games. Like they could not, they laid the blueprint out there. So I don't listen. Like I said, I'll still take the Chiefs to win the division, but I think there's something to be said for what the Raiders have. And like people are going to bitch and moan and be like, Henry Ruggs, he's not living up to his pick. But like when you start to get depth of receivers, okay, great. He may not ever live up to his draft pick, but if he scores 7 touchdowns and 4 of them are from 60 plus yards out, like that shit matters.
Yep. Well, like I said, we are homers here in Vegas. We love the Raiders. So we just saw an ESPN poll come out, NFL rankings. Raiders were 5 in the entire NFL, according to ESPN. The Chiefs are 10. So I just made sure to bet the Chiefs to win the division at -105. So while you guys were talking, I was making sure to get that bet in. They are a minus 105 right now to win the division. That's insane. Value, that's insane value.
I agree with you, but like we know what the math is. The math is they're in a 2-game hole and injuries happen in the NFL. Right? That's the math behind it.
They're going to win a minimum of 12 games and I don't believe the Raiders or the Chargers or the Broncos can win 12 games.
I think that's a fair assessment. I think they can because, look, I said about the Broncos, and there's a long way to go. I do think when you beat crappy teams and you start piling up wins, you gain momentum and you gain confidence and you play better. But I think as you recall, I said my best bet in the AFC on the totals was the Raiders over. Right? I thought that was the best bet in the division because the Chiefs number is so high. And I think the Broncos have a high variance. But I said if there's a team that's going to get on a roll and steal the division from the Chiefs, the Broncos have the roster to win a bunch of close games. And if the schedule smiles on them, which it's supposed to with the last place schedule, if it smiles on them and they take advantage of those games, then I think you could see them, like the Chiefs. It's harder to do this, but in 95 and 97 with Steve Bono as the quarterback one year and I don't know who the hell was the other one, Elvis Gerbach. They went 13-3, and in 97 they were the number 1 seed and lost a really close game to the Broncos, who would go on to win the Super Bowl, who were a wild card team. Like if there's a team that can get on that roll and win with a defensive score and beat all the teams they're supposed to beat, and then just be a little above 500 against the tough opponents, it's Denver. So I do think the division's tougher than people give it credit for.
Okay.
And I think I said that before the season began.
So let's talk some leans and likes here in a second. Von Tobel put up a number on teasers, right, John?
Mm-hmm.
You put up a little graphic. This last week was an amazing week, especially when you're rolling the miracle victory by the Ravens on the 66-yarder that bounced through. This was a tremendous week for teaser plays. How good was it?
So, and this is important, right? And I made a small mistake on the graphic. So with teasers, what you're always going to try to do with teasers is not just adding points, right? Like they're called the Wong teasers. You want to tease through key numbers. So like going from 7.5 down to 1.5, get through the 7, get through the 3. If you have a 1.5 point underdog, you can get through the 3, you can get through the 7, right? So you get up to 7.5. And so you get through 2 key numbers and it adds a ton of value. So on the graphic, I actually included Kansas City because they closed as a 7-point favorite. Theoretically, that doesn't fall into the Wong category because it wasn't 7.5. So if you remove that, every single teaser leg that you could have used cashed. Any which way you would have used it, as Jeff Vogel, one of my former colleagues at VSiN, put out, if you look at the basic strategy, 2-team teaser leg Sunday, 21-0 or 15-0, playing all the possibilities. It was insane. It was insane. Every single one of them. And of course, the Ravens in Justin Tucker's ridiculous kick is what gets it for you. And
by the way, I was sitting at a sports bar. I'm with my girlfriend. She's a Chargers fan, so she's a freaking lunatic. I already told. I'll mention the story real quick because I already told it on the air. I'm so proud of her because Sunday mornings I get super intense when we go out about the TVs and the games I want to watch, and I'm getting into like betting and stuff. If anyone asks about the Jets, I'm fuck the Jets right now. I can't even, right? But she's really into the Chargers, and she's really into the Chargers and Chiefs game. So we go over to her place, a bar. It's a Rams bar. We walk in. We're like, all right, okay, we're cool. There's going to be a bunch of Rams fans here. The game's a late start. I go up to the bar to get a TV change, get the Chargers and Chiefs on because it was on a different TV. All of a sudden, she's like, Steve. I'm like, what the hell's going on? She's like, we have to leave. I can't do this. So as we're walking out, she points to the fact that a lady who's like the head of the Rams fans club, right? Old lady gets dropped off by the freaking senior bus. Well, she comes in. As soon as she comes in, she generally just wants to talk to anyone who will talk to her. You could tell she's just a lonely old lady, and she just goes on and on and on and on. We were the only table in the table section.
So she's the female Adam Hill, you're saying?
Not exactly. Not exactly. But she was going to be super chatty, and my girlfriend's just like, I can't do this. I'm not doing this. I have no tolerance for this today. It's Chargers and Chiefs.
Dope.
F this. I cannot watch a game and have to talk to her the whole time. I was like, all right. So we moved on to another place. We walk in. There's a Chiefs fan sitting at the table next to us. So anyway, long story short, I have the TV with the Chiefs and Chargers. The Hail Mary's coming up at the end of the game. I swear to God, coinciding is Justin Tucker going for the field goal. And yep. I have the Ravens in a teaser down to 1.5. So I'm like swinging back and forth. And when I saw the kick, when I saw it bounce up in the air, I'm like, he came up 10 yards short? That hit the field? And then all of a sudden, he was like, oh, It was good. Holy crap! So,
and what I love about that too, but we're always going to forget. I mentioned this multiple times. We're always going to forget that they converted a 4th and 19 to get to that 66-yard field goal. Like the 66-yard field goal is always going to be remembered, not the 4th and 19 that the Detroit Lions gave up like 3 plays prior. But that, and I was on the Ravens too.
and the field goal should not have been attempted because they absolutely snapped like 3 seconds after the play. I like how the refs missed that.
After the play clock.
Oh yeah.
They have not. It is the biggest farce. The play clock is a joke. It is an absolute. I mean, go back and look at some of the Niners snaps in the Super Bowl, 54. It's like, the play where they ultimately, I think Frank Clark sacks and seals the game. It was 2 seconds after play clock was at 0. I mean, it happens all the time.
49ers 2 weeks ago, they were playing the Eagles, and on Jimmy G's game-sealing quarterback sneak, not only does the play clock expire for 2 seconds, he actually takes a preemptive step forward. He false starts and then snaps the ball, and they're just like, "Nah, we're good," and he just falls forward for a first down. They don't give a shit. But those teasers, they're perfect. So if you actually do true teasers, 7.5 or 1.5 through key numbers, any way you played it, you walk away with a victory.
So I've been doing them every week. I've been doing 2-team teasers every week. I had a bet a couple weeks ago.
How have you done?
I'm only 1-3.
Exactly.
The Ravens game. Without the Ravens game, I'm 0-4.
But let me ask, are you doing those like true key number teasers, or are you just teasing games?
No, I was doing the true key number teasers. I mean, one of them it's not key numbers because I teased up from like 12 to have 2 19-point dogs.
Yeah.
That was the Falcons game that effed me where they're down 28-25 and I'm getting 19.5 and they throw 2 pick sixes to lose 48-25.
Yeah.
So.
Listen, and it's been a long time since I was taking the bets. Okay. But the teasers, they're called a teaser for a reason. All right. And I listen and trust me, my buddies Eager and Sharuri over there at PFF and the PFF forecast, like George was stomping around about, he loved this tease. He wanted the Bucks next week laying 5.5. He was going to tease them down at New England. And who was he going to tease? He's taking a future line. This coming week's Bucks line. It's before last week. And he wanted to tease him with who? The Bucks at the Rams.
Right.
And like I know they're the key, and John's right. The key lines are important.
Yeah.
And coming through, or the key numbers are important coming through, the 3 and the 4, the 3 and the 7, most, and then the 4 and all those different numbers. That is an important part of the equation. But like, I'm amazed at how the idea of the tease just being easy money is back, because the tease was dead for a long time because people got their ass handed to them. And I think the more volume that gets on the teasers, the more the lines sharpen up for those. But I've talked to you a million times. That's why I love 5.5 dogs. I love 6 dogs, 5, 5.5, 6, and 6.5. It's hard for me to go against those. I've had to do it more, and they've come home more. Back in the day, that was easy money. Grabbing those, like I can remember me and you sitting at whatever that hellhole sports bar was that we were at, that we'd watch the games, and I would be money lining those games, right? And trying to steal that because I there was great value in those dogs, because I think humps would roll up there and let me tease down this, let me tease down that. Like teasers are, to me, are exactly what their name is. Now, Von Tobel, do you consistently pound away with wins at the teasers?
Yeah. So this year I've hit all 4 that I've played this year. Last year there was only 10 opportunities. I put them up on social media too at the end of last year. But last year there were 10 opportunities for me that I consider viable teaser opportunities. Went 8-2 on those. I think they're pretty solid bankroll builders. But I tend to be a little bit more selective, right? Like I usually stay away from road favorites of 7.5. I usually try to stay with home teams, right? Home underdogs of 1.5, home favorites of 7.5, to not only get the benefit of teasing them through key numbers, but also the benefit of playing at home, although we know that home field really isn't worth that much anymore, but it's still a small benefit that works in your favor. And, like even the one you're talking about with George, teasing 5.5 down to what at that point would be like a half, like a plus a half, whatever it is, that's not as valuable as teasing what the Rams in that situation. I had the Rams on a teaser last week, teasing the Rams up from 1.5 to 7.5 at home. that's a really good value as opposed to teasing a road favorite or whatever it is to the other way. So I think there's different ways to do it, and you obviously have to be pretty selective with it. And hell, that's why you stay away from road teams, because the Ravens almost blew it for you.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I think that's a great point, and the fact that you 10 times you saw the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
You don't have 4 teasers every weekend.
No, this past weekend was the one. This was the most teasers I've had in one weekend. It was 4, but just because there were so many different opportunities against, and it was such lesser competition too. Like I used more road teams this week than I usually would. Right, I had the Carolina Panthers, I had the Baltimore Ravens, and I had the Arizona Cardinals. This is the most I've ever used it. But those 3 teams that they played were some of the lower power rated teams in my indicator, my numbers. So I felt like it was comfortable, and I'm sitting there like, Jesus, the Ravens are going to kill this for me, and they didn't. Thank God.
So the reason I asked you about teasers, 1, I wanted the information. 2, first teaser candidate on the board. Boy, oh boy. Are we ready to put the Cincinnati Bengals in teaser bets? 7.5 against Jacks.
I'm not. I mean, obviously you get to that key number, right? And you'll be able sitting on a favorable position. But we always talk about this in the NFL. Like teams are never as bad as you really think they are, right? Take the Lions, for example. The Lions have been a pain in the ass for 2 of the 3 teams they've played up to this point. And the Texans, everybody thought the Texans were garbage. They blow out the Jacksonville Jaguars week 1, and they're tied with the Browns at halftime before Tyrod Taylor gets hurt. So teams are never as bad as we think they are. I just think this is an incredible swing for, in terms of a market power rating on a team like the Cincinnati Bengals. Like the Bengals were 4-point underdogs at open week 1 against Minnesota. Now they're at home laying over a touchdown against the Jacksonville Jags in a primetime spot. Like that's a really big jump on a power rating because the market thinks so little of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's a little too much.
I agree. I do think that, I love the point about never as good as you think, never as bad as you think. The NFL always drags you back to the middle. So when you see the overreactions, which I think are less and less because I think so many people are now more math inclined, right? And they have numbers that are going in like John. And I think, the old days of, the public jackasses are what really moves the line is not reality. But I do think that this is one where, listen, the Jaguars have a quarterback. I know he hasn't played well. Like that's one of my big things. Like I won't play a team that doesn't have a quarterback, right? So if the quarterback blows, then I don't want anywhere near it. Like I might miss some opportunities to grab a spot here and there, but things snowball when you don't have a quarterback. I think Trevor Lawrence is capable of good games. And so I don't feel like I'm grabbing a team that doesn't have a quarterback. And I do like what the Bengals are doing. I think they've got a lot of good pieces moving forward, but I think you love the Bengals as a dog. You don't love the Bengals laying points and laying a lot of points.
Yeah, asking them to win by 8 or more points, that's to me that's kind of insane when you're looking at this matchup. And I think we tend to last week we forget that the Jags did have a 6-point lead at halftime and picked off Kyler Murray and had the ball looking to add to that lead before everything kind of tumbled out from underneath them and they lost their footing. So this is going to be a team that gets slightly better as the year goes along. And I just in the beginning of the year, this was going to be a game where the Cincinnati Bengals were like a 3.5 or 4.5 point favorite. And now you're laying well over a touchdown.
Yeah, these are some rough games at the top of the card. Soren has sworn off the Falcons. He does not want to bet the Falcons for, against, F them. You got football team. I don't know what's going on with their defense, but they just got their tits lit at Buffalo. Washington's 1.5 at Atlanta.
So we talk about teasers. This is the teaser I put in for this week. One of the legs, at least, is Atlanta up to 7.5 at home against Washington. I just don't. For me, you mentioned, and I'll pull up the number because I have this in terms of the Washington defense. But across the board, you're talking about, let's see, DVOA defensively 29th, expected points added defensively 30th, yards per drive 29th in points per drive, 30th and 3-and-out rate offensively. They're terrible, the Washington football team. And I get it. Atlanta has not any great shakes, but the market moved against them last week against New York, thinking that they were worse than they really are, and that ultimately wasn't the case. And then you get this here where Washington, who defensively, especially on the back end, has not looked very good, and now is laying points on the road against Atlanta. I think the market might be a little too low here on the Falcons.
I would tend to agree, although the Falcons are just an absolute cancer as far as I'm concerned. I will say that they are my kryptonite, and I can't get on the right side of them. When I'm finally ready to be listen, they can't win. They find a way to win. So I will caution anybody. My thoughts on the Falcons have been an absolute train wreck. I do think there's something to be said. I think early on, it's about now that you can kind of start checking, like, what did you think a team was going to be before the year? If you thought Washington was going to be asked and they're living up to your expectations and keep going down that road, but if you thought, okay, listen, they've got defense, they've got a coach. The one thing that bothers me, and listen, Buffalo is debunking it. I thought I was on to something with like all the turmoil that came with the COVID stuff with the Buffalo Bills and what's his nuts, the receiver that was, always captain vocal about it. I'm like,
Cole Beasley.
Yeah, Cole Beasley. I'm like, Sam Donaldson, I think his name is. I'm like, okay, is this going to be a problem all year? And are they going to have these distractions? And after the Pittsburgh game, you're like, well, I don't think Pittsburgh's that good, which I don't. Although defensively they were much better when they had TJ Watt in there. But I was like, okay, this I think there's something to that. Like, this may not be a team that's all on the same page. When the coach is like publicly saying, like, I don't know why these guys aren't taking it seriously. I had cancer. Why aren't they getting it done? Like, I do wonder if there's a disconnect there as far as the team and, the players aren't interested in hearing what the coach has to say about that kind of thing. And so what equity Ron Rivera, who I think is a good coach, would have is now out there. But I do think this is a big game because I don't think there's any shame in getting slapped by the Bills if they're going to play right. And the Chargers, we saw what they did against the Chiefs. So those 2 losses, I don't think look that bad. If they bounce back and beat the Falcons, you go, football teams, what we thought they were 8-9, 9-8, beat the bad teams, lose to the good teams. Right. So I think this is a tougher spot. But freely admitting that I suck on the Falcons and I hate them.
and I hate them.
I can't get on the right side.
Yeah, I know. This one's a doozy too. I feel like you have to play Detroit, but I just said you have to play Detroit. That's insane. Chicago is 3, 2.5. We'll start out with Petro here because Soren, you may I don't know what you're going to say here, but you may be the only person I can find who is going to back Matt Nagy and shit on Justin Fields because the narrative this week is Nagy's an idiot and bordering on he just did that on purpose to Justin Fields. And I remember you telling me last week, you're like, Fields is going to suck when he plays.
Yes.
He might get better, but he is going to suck early on, and he sucked.
So, number one, I think you have to be worried about being part of the herd mentality. I actually think it's absolutely embarrassing the way the ESPN analysts, I don't know if most people have jobs, real jobs. I don't. And so I watch like the ESPN morning shows while I'm doing my work. And it's like Dan Orlovsky I think he's embarrassing. And he went on, he's like, give me a camera. Can I get a solo camera? I need a solo camera. Give me a solo camera. Matt Nagy should be fired this instant. He should be fired this instant because he's too incompetent to come up with a game plan for Justin Fields, or he did it to him on purpose, which is like an accusation like that. A coach went out and came up with a game plan to tank one of his own players is a serious allegation, right? It was made by the biggest business partner that the NFL has. I'm stunned by it. And then it was this absolute mob mentality of everybody's like, you got to fire Matt Nagy right now. Meanwhile, he was coach of the year a couple of years ago. And now everything that he did, it's like I heard Rex Ryan say Mitchell Trubisky carried Matt Nagy to the coach of the year award 3 years ago. Like I can't tell you, like I'll jump in and I'll take the Bears here. Right? Because I don't think it's that bad there. I don't think Fields is good. I don't think he's going to end up being good. And I definitely don't think he's good right now. And what I watched in preseason was I saw a guy who runs, which is great. He's going to escape. He's going to run for some first downs. But in the NFL, you have to be able to throw the ball. And he couldn't do it. And he didn't do it in the same game the week before when Andy Dalton was 8 of 11. He was 6 of 13 for 50 yards against the same defense. I don't know why that doesn't count or doesn't resonate with anybody. Fields is a guy who should be watching the first year. He may have a Josh Allen third year, but I don't think he's going to be good at any point this year. So I don't, that scares me, but explain to me why we see everybody on the line, right? Like I get that the Lions have played a little tough in spots, but like same thing about the Bengals. Are we really ready to be like, oh, I love the Lions here to step up and win some games? The health of the Bears defense, I know Khalil Mack left during the game, and so that's a question mark. So I would want to know who's going to play. But yeah, I think Matt Nagy's a better coach. And I think when everybody thinks it's this easy to just bet the Lions and take your money, I think you're going to get stung.
By the way, 91% of the cash, 86% of the tickets on the Lions.
Yeah.
Oh my God!
But I'm interested in what Von Tobel thinks.
Yeah.
So I personally think that Matt Nagy stinks, but I also think it was everybody's fault in that game, right? Like I think there's blame to go around for everybody. I think Justin Fields, if you watched him in the preseason, and Soren, one of the things that has driven me absolutely nuts through 3 weeks, kind of along to your blinds, is since the Sunday night game, you got to put Justin Fields in. Andy Dalton's awful. You got to put Fields in. And it's like you didn't watch him. If that was your claim, you didn't watch him in the preseason. He holds onto the ball too long. His average time to throw was one of the longest in the preseasons because he did that. He locks into his first read a lot, and that leads to him taking a lot of sacks and a lot of punishment. How many times did he get sacked on? So was it 8, 9 times on Sunday? 9 times, right. But I think when you look at it, it's a mix of everything. Fields isn't that good right now. He could potentially be really good, but he's just not good right now. He had a screen pass that he threw into his offensive lineman's ass. He had a out route that he just sailed, mailed 10 yards out of bounds. He's just not really good right now. But at the same time, I also think Nagy can do more in terms of play calling, not traditional dropbacks, move the pocket a little bit more, give him some stuff that'll be a little bit easier for him, use that athleticism a little bit more. So I think there's fault to go all the way around. But at the end of the day, when it comes to this game, if you like Detroit, you've missed the boat. Like the opener on Sunday was 4.5. You're down to as low as 2.5 right now. So you're late to the party. You're insanely late to the party. And I would ask anybody this. It's a simple exercise, but it's one I like to use all the time. The Bears are now down in some spots to 2.5 against the Detroit Lions. It's the exact number they were laying against Cincinnati when they played them 2 weeks ago. Do you power rate Detroit and Cincinnati the same? Because I think I would power rate Detroit a little bit worse than Cincinnati. So this number should probably be a little bit higher than where it is right now.
All right. I'm in. I'm a Bears whore. Been all over the Bears. I believe in Matt Nagy.
I don't think he's very good, but I think everything came together to just create that mess that we watched on Sunday.
Will every NFL teaser in the world include the Titans laying 7.5 against the Jets on the road?
I mean, probably. Right. It's the key number thing, but it's also the Jets. But like I said, I tend to stay away from road teams, or at least I try to. I also don't like the Titans that much. I think the Titans, we talk about teams that stink.
I agree.
The Titans defensively aren't very good. You saw them get exposed in a really big way by Arizona in week 1. The Seahawks had a 24-9 lead that they blew because their own defense stinks, but they got that because that secondary was god-awful against Seattle. And while Ryan Tannehill's doing a fantastic job with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, Brown's banged up, and they're a little top-heavy, and there's no real depth there. So I think you got to be careful. Like we always talk about it, right? Like these teams aren't as bad as you think. This is not a team with a pass rush that's going to take advantage of your offensive line there, Steve. So this might be the sneaky game where Zach Wilson looks relatively competent against a defense that's not very good.
Well, that to me is the problem, right? Because I agree with Von Tobel. I'm not a big Titans fan, and I think over the season that'll bear out that they're not going to be as good as they look. Not maybe 7 weeks in, 8 weeks in. I am a fan of their coach. Maybe it's just because I think it's a good interview, right? So I'll open that up. But I think he gets it as far as the coach goes. But I don't like the personnel moves that they made in the offseason, so I'm not big on the Titans. But again, if I don't have a quarterback, I have a hard time putting a bet down because it snowballs and it goes to hell in a handbasket. And he's thrown 6 interceptions the last 2 weeks, or 2 weeks ago and 2 last week. Like that's a killer. And he's not been the playmaker that he was supposed to be. I would bet the Jets. I don't think I could bet the Titans because I'm a little bit curious why this isn't more, because I think if you look at suicide pools, right, everybody and their brother is grabbing they're betting the anti-Jets, whoever the Jets play, because I'm in several of those that have a lot of different people in it, and everybody is just moving whoever the Jets play. And I think at some point they're going to get stung. I don't think it's as easy as that. I don't think they should be that bad, but if Zach Wilson's going to play the way he's played the last 2 weeks, they are that bad.
All right.
You're the Jets guy. What do you got?
Honestly, I don't care. I don't watch the Jets. The only way I watch them is if I go back on NFL.com and watch them back. I go out to watch the games, and I don't have the balls to walk up to anyone and go, I need the Jets game on. I don't want to get punched. I don't want to get punched in the face.
Really quickly, just what we're talking about, defensive efficiency wise, just because they were just updated today by Football Outsiders. Tennessee's 28th right now. So again, when you don't have that kind of a pass rush, like this might be the game where Zach Wilson just finds some comfort level to stay within a big number like that.
Connor Mack, what's up?
What up, man?
Minnesota's getting 2 at home against Cleveland. This is a tough one.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. So Minnesota was like my biggest play. I had a lot of stuff tied to Minnesota last weekend, just because it was all really anti-Seattle more than like pro Minnesota. And I think Minnesota's kind of sneaky good offensively. You know, if you read some of the write-ups about why they've been forced to play more 3 wide receiver sets because of the injuries at tight end and how that's opened up this offense for Kirk Cousins, that's legitimate, right? And Dalvin Cook, as much as I like him, he's a running back. And you can plug those guys into that system, and guys like Madison are going to work perfectly well. But I think the problem here for me is I keep going back to Minnesota's offensive line is still not very good in terms of pass protection, and Seattle has no pass rushers to expose that. Cleveland does. Cleveland just got 9 sacks against a bad offensive line against Chicago, and you're going to be able to see them go to work here against Minnesota. And I think that's the one thing that kind of leaves me a little wary here about Minnesota's chances against Cleveland.
I'll take the better quarterback. I'll take Cleveland. I mean, I think that's part of the equation. I think Cousins can get some things done, but I think Cousins is a guy who's just good enough to get you beat. I think Baker Mayfield's ready to make more plays. I do think the Browns are a little bit of a team that, you know, I'm not going to say they're the 19 Chiefs, but I think they are a team that the way it finished last year has inspired them to go out and have a great year. And I think they're going to be tough each and every week. When it's down there, where all it basically got to do is get the winner. I think the Browns will find a way to win this game.
Miami and Indianapolis. Miami off a wild game. Jacoby Brissett's going to be the quarterback for a while. John is a tried and true Colts fan. What do you think of the Colts right now, John?
I think injuries is a big part of what's going on, right? Like their offensive line is not fully healthy. We saw Quentin Nelson get carted off against the Tennessee Titans. So that's just another blow for an offensive line that's been one of the worst in the NFL. Now it's going to get even worse. Miami doesn't have like dynamic pass rushers, but it's still a problem. Carson Wentz, you're talking about a quarter. Like, I don't know if you can evaluate Carson Wentz. He was practicing for 4 weeks, 5 weeks before the season started. And that was off and on. It wasn't like it was consecutive weeks. And then you just throw him out there behind a bad offensive line. He's just getting destroyed. So, and then we talk about Paris Campbell, T.Y. Hilton. Like, there's all these injuries all along with this offense. So I think until this team starts to get healthy, they're not one that I think is worth backing at this point, because their defense was solid last year, but it's a defense at time that could play with leads, a defense that kept everything in front of them, contained big plays, and they would give up points, but they had a competent enough offense that could keep them in a lot of those games. And that's just not the case anymore here. So, like, I think it seems like a relatively solid bounce back spot for Miami. And again, like after the game, like Carson Wentz is like hobbling out to go shake hands with Ryan Tannehill. Like, is he fully healthy? Because they're going to keep rolling him out there. But I think I'll say this, like, as the season goes along, big picture, I wouldn't be surprised to see this get worse, like even worse than it gets better, because they have motivation to bench Wentz. They don't want to give the Eagles a first round pick. So like this thing's going to get worse, I think, quicker than it's going to get better for Indianapolis.
I don't like the game because I feel like Brissett, you know, if you're like, oh wow, he took the Raiders to the wire.
Brisket revenge game.
Yeah, and well, true. So do you buy into that? He's going to decide today's the day I'm going to be really good.
Do you watch him on the sidelines and his demeanor?
Jacoby Brissett?
Yeah. He is the most stoic dude. I know he was talking about meditation and all that stuff. He's the most stoic dude ever. So I don't see him being all fire in the belly about the Colts effing him over. Which by the way, they didn't. So
yeah, I don't like I am puzzled by why the line is dropping. Right? Like, because like I think like the line should be set and it should just sit there. Because I don't know how you could get real fired up about either one of these teams.
No.
You know, that's the thing for me. Like, what's your angle on either one of these teams? Like, Brissett's going to get it done. I think the Colts are the Dolphins. Like, the Dolphins are they had a puzzling offseason in the sense that they went out and got all these free agents and brought together a pretty good team, and then they jettisoned all of them. You know, Kyle Van Noy and all these guys, all these moves that they made. It's
Shaq
like
Lawson, yep.
Yeah, it's like, okay, so what was the plan? Like, it seemed to work, and so now build on it. So I'm puzzled by what the plan is, and I don't, I'm starting to believe that Tua's not going to be much more than just a guy at quarterback, but I know Brissett is very limited. And I think even in the comeback against the Raiders, on any meaningful play, he was looking to run for the first down. Like he just wants to move the chains. And when they got down to the goal line, you can see him. He's not like, okay, this is the guy that's going to be open. He is looking for his avenue to run, which is a guy who questions his ability to throw. The problem is the Colts, like, the offensive line is what they're supposed to be able to bank on. Eric Fisher came back and played, but he hadn't been playing that great. And I can't get my arms around who's the better team battling injuries right now.
I'd say really quickly to the point about Brissett, I would push back on he doesn't trust his ability to throw. His offensive line in front of him is one of the worst in the NFL in terms of pass blocking. And so I think
just to be clear, I'm not saying that I think he'll put the ball in the air, but I think right now he's looking to run.
Yeah, well, because I think by choice, like sometimes it's not by choice, right? Like he's getting pressured. Like second he takes a snap, he's got to do it in his face. He's got to get mobile and try to get out of there. And I think that's part of the reason why. But I think these are two teams I was down on coming into the year. I've got a bunch of no Miami not to make the playoffs, under win totals, things like that. So I don't really have a good read. It's only pessimistic for Miami for me.
Is Carolina for real? If they are, then I guess you have to take the 5 against Dallas, right?
So I have Dallas on my short list potentially to play. The market's been moving in Carolina's favor, so we get 4.5 or 4 or something like that. I think I'll be using Dallas in a contest for sure, depending on what the number is going to be. But look at the quarterbacks that Carolina has faced up to this point, right? We're talking about Davis Mills, Jameis Winston, and the name I am blanking on at this point right now. Zach Wilson. Yeah, Zach Wilson. Yeah. So for their defense, well, I think there's some legitimacy to them being good, right? They spent all of those picks a year ago on defensive players, and there seems to be some real talent. I think there's questions. This is a big step up in competition. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys I think they're the highest graded offense by PFF standards at this point right now. And on the flip side, we talk about bad offensive lines. The one thing that has emerged for Sam Darnold, how about this? Because I love what PFF does in terms of some of the metrics and how they break down offensive line play. On true pass sets, he's been pressured on 45% of his dropbacks. It's not a good offensive line. And he was getting the crap beat out of him against Houston. Now all of a sudden you talk about Micah Parsons moving to edge and how much better he's been playing. This Dallas offense, I think, is very good and is going to be able to test them. J.C. Horn's out, right? So they go and get C.J. Henderson because they have to fill in at corner. I think this is a pretty big test for the Panthers, and I tend to think that they're going to fail it this weekend.
Do we believe that Micah Parsons were good, that we're going to hang our hat on the fact that this is a big-time edge rusher?
No, but I think it's a bad offensive line, and I think he's good enough to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I don't I'm always leery, like I said, on the tease down lines. And so are you going to be teasing this one, John?
No, I'm going to be just playing. I want to see what the market does with it. Yeah, Cowboys minus 4.5 or 4. Yeah.
I too, this is a crash of two teams that I think I would like to get on the other side of, but they're playing each other. Because I think the Cowboys are a little bit overrated right now. I do like their offense, but I think Dak Prescott is a guy that in a big game can get you a field goal. He can't get you a touchdown. I'm still not convinced with all that weaponry. They should routinely go down and get scores. And last year, he routinely couldn't get the touchdown when they needed. I granted it was only 5 games, but I'm not all in on the Cowboys are 10-7-ish in my book, which will win them that division for sure, right? But as far as being able to go out and get it done, and Carolina, I agree with you. I think people are starting to get way too excited about Carolina. So I love being on the opposite side of Carolina. I just wish that they were playing, some 1-2 team that I think is actually Chiefs Carolina. Give me the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs are ready to unload. Even trying to think of somebody else. Anybody that you think is pretty good that's off to a slow start, I'd love them against Carolina. I think there's a little bit of, I'm not all in on Dallas. I think there's defensive questions still to be. I like the defensive coordinator change. They're clearly better, but I would probably stick away from this just because I'm not ready to commit to Dallas. But if John's all in on Dallas, I get why he's going where he's going.
Giants against New Orleans. It's 7.5. I think this number's too big. I will take the Giants. You should know the Giants, for some reason, I think we can explain it now. We'll see if it plays out this year. Giants are actually 20-7 on the road as underdogs against the spread. They're 20-7 ATS as road underdogs. So they actually play well away from home. Might make sense now when you're fucking getting booed. The Giants fans are pissed, and they're retiring Eli Manning's jersey, and John Mara's out there, and they're just raining booze on it. Giants fans are pissed. That is not a pleasant place to play for the home team right now.
I'll take the Giants. I'm with you. I think this is a spot where I think they have offensive firepower. They should be better on the offensive side of the ball. Daniel Jones is a complete enigma. It's like enigma against enigma, right? With the two quarterbacks that are there. Which guy, are they? Is Jones going to fumble it 3 times and throw a pick? Is Winston going to throw 5 picks? Like, I feel like they've coached. I called Jameis Winston a gelding, right? Like, I feel like, the hope was that he was going to go, if you're a Winston fan or you're a Saints fan, the hope is that he's going down there when Sean Payton will coach out the picks. But the 5,000 yards he threw for Tampa 2 years ago will still be there. And maybe he doesn't throw, maybe with – throwing out what did he have, 30 picks or 27 picks or whatever it was, maybe with getting that down to like 10 or 12 or 15, like, okay, you have to give up some of the touchdowns as well. But like, he, to me, is completely neutered as a quarterback. Like, the plays that he could make for you, like, he's not making those. It's just all about not turning the ball over. And I think, and Daniel Jones is playing for, the being the guy, right? If he doesn't get it done, they're going to be all about getting a quarterback. So, like, which quarterback do you think will suck less? And, like, I kind of think the answer is whatever. They're both going to kind of suck. So I'll take the Giants and the points because I think offensively they should be better than what they've shown to this point. But I the one thing I will say is, like, I think it's becoming crystal clear the Giants are not a well-coached team, right? And so and Sean Payton can coach. We know he can coach. Now, I think his offensive talent is limited, so I don't love this, but I will take the Giants and the points that they can back ass into a decent game plan. Saints defense is tough. There's a lot of reasons that's what's carrying this number, but I'm not. I don't love the game, but I'll take the Giants.
I think that's the side I'd rather be on, like, for sure. I don't think I'd actually bet it, but like the thing that when you look at the Giants, the positives are 100. Like, Daniel Jones has quietly been kind of okay this year. PFF has him as their 4th highest graded passer. That's Daniel Jones. And maybe a lot of that stems from the Washington game, but he hasn't been the abomination that he, looked to be potentially at times last year. So that's going to help you out. I think the one thing that worries me is, Sterling Shepard, Darius Slayton, are they going to be healthy? Because they both went down in the first half against Atlanta. And so are they going to be out there on the field? Blake Martinez got hurt last week too. But I think when you look at New Orleans, it's funny. I like teams that the market has a weird fickle relationship with, right? So, like, you had New Orleans, for example, that game against Carolina, market was all over Carolina in that spot against New Orleans. They get blown out. The next week, the market is kind of against New Orleans. They take care of business, and then you get what's going on here. Like, it's been a fickle relationship back and forth with the New Orleans Saints, and the market can't really seem to grasp where they're at. But I would agree with that. I don't think they're a team at this point that is 8 points better than anybody on the road. And I get that home field is not worth that much anymore. But even to that point, they lost Teron Armstead to an injury. Don't know if he's going to be available. They've already been one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in the league with him in there. I just think this is going to be one of those where the Saints might win, but I think this is not definitely going to be close to sniffing covering 8 points here.
This is where the schedule gets good. There's a lot of really good games. I'm not sure if Kansas City Philly is a good game, but certainly the storyline is there. The Kansas City's got to get his shit together, and I won't use Jalen Hurts' line about taking the deuce and flushing it, but I think a lot of people
by the way, we all looked. We all look. We've all looked multiple times. His line about not looking in the toilet.
Oh, no.
We've all pushed one out, and we're like, I got to see what that looked like.
Yeah, Curtis had it in the show open today about where it is, and his first thing he said is everybody looks.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. When you're 50 or older, and it gets harder to take a dump, you look like you're fired up about the quality. It's like, what did that look like? It's gross. But
with your diet of baked potatoes and coffee, I mean, it's got to look terrible.
Yeah, I'm.
Football season has not been. I was doing pretty well. Dropped a little bit of weight, man. Football season it's rough. It is rough. A lot of chicken fingers so far. A lot of chicken.
Got to get on the program. I'm down 17 lbs, man. You got to get on the program.
I was doing keto pretty well, but it's falling apart now. So we'll see what happens in the next month or so as I balloon back up. So 7.5 Kansas City on the road. So what's the vibe in KC? Is it freak out time or super confident still?
So I put out a thing on Monday morning. Okay, they're 1-2 after 17 games. What's their record? And at like 10 in the morning, it was like 9-8, 10-7, 8-9, 11-6, 13-4, 9-8, 10-7. By like noon, like the average was kind of like 10-7, right? By noon, it was back up to 11-6. By the time we hit the airwaves, they were back to 13-4, 12-5, and so they were kind of getting over it. The bottom line is this: like they had 4 turnovers and took the ball away 0. I don't think they're going to take it away a lot, although Spagnuolo has had a pretty good ability to, when he can't stop someone, take it away, to like gamble at the right times and make the big play and kind of take it away. But Curtis looked this up. Now with the Chiefs, 86 times a team has had 4 since 2011, has had 4 turnovers with 0 takeaways. They're 2-84. Right? 2-84. By the way, the Raiders last year in the final game of the year were one of the ones that came through. I can't remember who they had, the Broncos or Chargers or who it was, but they were one of the games. I know it was the Raiders was one of the games. That they're not turning the ball over 4 times, right? Like that's not it's not going to happen. They don't routinely turn the football over. Although I will say I do think the league, like a question was asked of Eric Bieniemy this week by Darren Smith, who works with me. He said, has the NFL caught up with the Chiefs offense and Patrick Mahomes? And he said, and I got this because the Zoom and the Chiefs only let you ask one question sometimes. And so he's like, and this, and he asked the second question. And Eric Bieniemy laughed. He goes, I got to laugh at your first question. No, we're doing this. I'm like, that you're wrong. Like they have. Like the league does. That's what happens. They see what you're doing. You didn't go sign Josh Gordon because you think you're going to piss in everybody's ear, right? Like you thought you needed a little help. And so I do think there's an element of the league catching up somewhat to Patrick Mahomes and to the Chiefs. And the Chiefs got to reinvent themselves a little bit. And I think Josh Gordon maybe will help them reinvent themselves. I don't think he's going to go for 1,200 yards. But I think just having that threat can make other guys better. That being said, okay, defensively, I think a move of Chris Jones back to defensive tackle is coming soon. And I think that's going to make them better on the defensive side of the ball. And I don't think they'll turn the ball over 4 times. And I think they will get some takeaways. And I think this is easy pickings. I don't buy the Eagles. I don't buy Jalen Hurts. I don't think the Eagles are a good team. Nick Sirianni is, I think, at heart, a Todd Haley disciple. I think Todd Haley guys, I think Sirianni's a little bit dangerous and can have a day. But overall, I think the Eagles are one of the worst teams in the NFL. And I think if you caught this game in week 10 or 11, the spread would be Chiefs minus 14.5. And so I think the Chiefs are one of the easiest plays of the week.
It is pretty funny where this number was. So they lose over the weekend to San Diego or to Los Angeles, and the reopen is Chiefs minus 5. Market goes immediately to 5.5. They play Monday night. Eagles get blown out 7.5. Like just like with this, but Soren, I'm curious. You're like because. I really subscribe to like the analytical thinking when it comes to football. It makes a lot of sense. And right. I think one of the things that I've really come around on over the last year has been, your defense is just you're as good as the offense you play almost to a certain extent. Right.
Yes.
And I think there was a problem with Kansas City to a point because one of the things I wrote about for our website at vsin.com was since 2015, I think it was, they have ranked 25th or lower in adjusted line yards allowed per carry, essentially how their defensive front grades against the run. Like the run defense has always been kind of a problem for them. But when you looked at the extremes of this year, your first few games, like you're talking about the Ravens, you're talking about the Browns, you're talking about the Chargers. Those are some really good offenses that you're facing. And so like the move of why am I blanking on the massive defensive lineman that you just mentioned?
Chris Jones.
Yeah, Chris Jones. Moving him back, I think, would help. But, like, how bad is that defense? Because I think that's the one thing that gives me pause is, like, there's been some extreme numbers, and I don't think they're that bad. But this has been a consistent theme with this team over the last couple of years.
It is, and I think some of it's by design. Like, I believe you throw to win and you run when you're winning.
Yeah.
And, we've seen it, they gave up, I don't know what it was against the Browns. It was well over 200 yards against the Ravens. I think it was close to, if not over 200 yards against the Browns. And both those games were in doubt. The Chiefs won against the Browns, and the Ravens, they was a game that they very easily could have won if they didn't have a number of self-inflicted wounds. Chargers didn't try to run as well. They're not as good a running team, but they are a good offensive team. I think what is the bigger problem for the Chiefs is the pass rush, right? Like the running numbers stand out, but they're not getting to the quarterback. And believe me, Chris Jones at defensive end isn't their problem, but he's grading as like the 20-something defensive end when he's like the number 2 defensive tackle. And he got a better pass rush on the inside. And so Steve Spagnuolo was asked, are you going to put him inside? He's like, yeah, we're not ready to go there right now. Like the hesitation to me says it all. It's clearly being considered, and maybe they don't do it right now. Maybe they think they can get by against the Eagles and then against the Bills, a game that's a much more important game. Maybe he gets a sack or 2 on the outside, and then you see him play exclusively as defensive tackle against the Bills where he is better suited. Part of this was placating Chris Jones, who always wanted to play DN. I think to get paid on the outside. Like he's not getting paid enough with a 4-year, $84 million deal, but he's better on the inside. But to your point, they do. They always struggle against the run. And the 49ers ran the ball on them. And, you don't run your way to a 17-point lead. And so when you give Patrick Mahomes a chance in a game to come back and beat you, he generally comes back and beats you. Now, the surprising part was that he threw the pick against the Chargers, right? Most people thought with a tie game, Patrick Mahomes, the ball, and a touch and a timeout, the spread is 7. He's going down and getting 7, and we're going to get a push out of this thing. And instead he threw the interception. And I think if he doesn't throw the INT, which everybody's human, I think they go down and get a touchdown. I think this game would have been a push. There is some fundamental issues, right? Like they do have some issues on the defensive side of the ball. They haven't covered in eons. And but I think this is somewhat of an overreaction. I think the Eagles suck. And I still think the Chiefs are one of, and I would say still the best team in the AFC for the point you made, John. That offense is what wins championships. And I think there's reason to believe that Steve Spagnuolo will get better. I don't think he'll get as good as he was in 2019 because I think there's some schematic things that he has to do a better job of adjusting against. The league is adjusted, and I don't know that he's adjusted with it. And I also do worry if I'm wrong about this game and I'm wrong about the season, that the Chiefs are just a tired team. They've had 3 years of like putting everything into it without having had the experience of how to handle every year. How do you handle when you get to the AFC Championship game? They didn't know, they got there. How do you handle when you try to push forward to the Super Bowl? They didn't know, but they got there and they won it. And then how do you defend it again? They didn't know, but they got all the way to the Super Bowl. And I think they're either tired or fat and happy, contract hunting. I think that is an issue with this team, but I think overall there's a huge mismatch. And I think this is a get-back game. And I think if the Chiefs get the Eagles down, they're going to pummel them, try to make themselves feel better.
I will say, and it's kind of a hardcore angle, but it was one thing that stuck out when they played Baltimore. And it's not like the Eagles have the same running game, but when it comes to Chris Jones playing the edge, they ran options to his side so much, and like he was slow and he was plotting and he didn't know how to play them. And I wonder how often you see that with Philly, because when they showed some of those replays and he's just like it was incredible to watch it.
I think if the Chargers had a better running game, you would have seen more of it. And I agree with you. And I think one of the things, like Chris Jones, Eric Eager mentioned this, he's at his best when he's playing like 40 snaps. And they've kind of been holding him to that. And he's only played 40 snaps on the inside. The Chiefs kind of sold it as they got Jaron Reed, and so they were going to get most of Chris Jones back with Jaron Reed. He's been non-existent. And I do think on the outside, Chris Jones has had his moments, but against the run, I think he has no interest. He was not a great run defender on the inside, and I think they took advantage. They didn't take advantage of it. They said, listen, you like to go after the ball, and Derek Nottie stayed home, right? And even Alex Okafor, their other defensive ends. Everybody else played assignment sound football, and they let Chris Jones kind of freelance. When you freelance a defensive end, like you get screwed, and the Ravens completely took advantage of that. And I think it's one of the reasons why you're going to see him back at D tackle soon. And the only reason I don't think it might not be this game is because they don't want to show it to the Bills. And they want the Bills to prep for him at DN, and then they make the move against the Bills. But I'd be shocked if by week 5 he's not predominantly a D tackle.
Texans are getting 16.5 at Buffalo. I think this is a great spot for the Texans. I know it sounds crazy, but Buffalo's, as you said, fat and happy, coming off a big win against football team. I don't believe in look-ahead spots often in the NFL, but next up for the Bills are the Chiefs. They're going to be fired up to blow away the Texans, or can the Texans hang around enough in, maybe Buffalo only scores 24 or 28. Texans have to, get to double digits to cover 16.5.
I mean, they might not look by him, but fourth quarter, you're up by 3 touchdowns. I think there's a quicker cane to pull Josh Allen out of that game, right? So I think that helps you out. But I will say this. So, one, it opened 17.5, and I wish I was like, I should grab that, and it went away. But the other thing is, so we have all these conversations about, through 3 weeks, you're kind of as good as your schedule is up to this point, right? We talked about the Raiders and how good they could potentially be defensively or how not, right? The same thing with Carolina. I've seen a lot of praise for Buffalo's defense, but at the same time, Buffalo has faced the Pittsburgh Steelers, they have faced the Miami Dolphins, and they have faced the Washington football team. So I think we have to kind of pump the brakes on how legitimately good this defense could be until we see them against quality competition. Now, if it's Tyrod Taylor, it's quality competition, but that doesn't look like it's going to be the case. But at one point, it's just as simple as it's really hard to cover 16.5, 17 in the National Football League. This isn't college. And I get that they did it, right, in a big way against Washington, but they weren't covering a 17.5 point spread there. They were covering a 7.5 point spread. It's a massive difference to ask an ask like this in the NFL. So, yeah, it's Texans or pass. There's no question about it.
I saw some numbers. I don't remember what they are, but pretty much anytime it gets above 14, you should either be on the dog or you shouldn't play it. Certainly when we get up towards 17, I think to John's point, to 17.5, I think you should be on the dog or you shouldn't play it. I do think the Texans are bad, right? I think they're showing some heart off being called bad to their face for months. And I do think the Bills defense sucks. And I do still wonder about their turmoil to the point about the schedule, but this isn't it. I can't play the Texans. If Tyrod Taylor plays, then I would play the Texans. I can't play. And what is the latest on his status?
It's just week to week. I haven't seen anything official for this week, but it doesn't sound like he's going to play.
If he plays, I think you play the Texans because of this is just too many points against NFL teams, and I think the Bills have a bad defense, so I think the Texans can get some points. But if it's not him, then I won't play a team without a quarterback.
I was going to try to pull up. I sent these into the show the other day because I was asking this to Matt Humans, my co-host, and I think this is a fun exercise, which is the way Tyrod had been playing, right? They'd scored 50 points in the mid-quarterback. They're averaging over 6.5 yards per play, over 40 yards per drive. He'd been great through 6 quarters. What's this number if it's Tyrod Taylor? You're telling me that this is it going to be like 14.5, whatever it is? I'll take 14.5 at Tyrod Taylor. This seems like a really extreme number. And Davis Mills and his extremely long neck are not very good, but I just when you look at this overall, it's insane to look at this with Buffalo in that regard.
How much do we believe in Arizona? And I guess on the flip side, do we think the Rams are the best team in the NFL? Rams are laying 5.
I don't know if they're the best team in the NFL, but I think they're better than the market's telling you they are here against Arizona. I think the Rams are on my list for this week too. I think that. So I was on them last week.
Wait, before you go further, let me ask you this because I tend to agree with you. I think the Rams are good, and I don't think they got the credit they deserve coming into this year. But do you believe in letdowns?
Not in the NFL.
Okay.
I think letdowns are real in college when they're young kids and they have a lot more off-field distractions and things. But this is a profession. This is their profession. You have 16 now, 17 games. If you want to, and especially when you have a team like this, Soren, where a couple of these guys kind of made it to the mountaintop a few years ago and lost. You have a guy like Matt Stafford who has never really gotten close to that. This seems to be a team that is loaded with dudes who really want to make this happen. You know what I mean? Hell, you can even include a guy like Jalen Ramsey who made it to an AFC Championship game a couple of years ago. So I think from a motivation standpoint, there's all the motivation in the world to win every single game, and especially when it's a divisional game, right? I think maybe you can we can buy into that if you took on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a big potential NFC preview or NFC Championship preview, and then you get the Jags the next week or something like that. But now this is a divisional rival who's been playing some solid football. But I just think I have questions about Kyler Murray. He's been off to a really good start, but he still puts the ball in danger. You saw that multiple times against Minnesota. You saw that last week against Jacksonville. I think that the secondary hasn't really been tested until you saw what Kirk Cousins did to them. Kirk Cousins picked them apart for 3 quarters, and then the offense just really fell off. But you saw some blemishes there. And I think the Los Angeles Rams are a legitimately good team. Defensively, they have what it takes to bother Kyler Murray, keep everything in front of them, and force turnover-worthy plays. It's one of the best teams in the league since the beginning of last year in terms of average depth of target by opponent quarterbacks, by air yards allowed, all of those sort of things. Like, I just think this is a matchup that works well for LA. And I'm just going to play against the market perception that the Cardinals are as good as they're saying. Because, again, this opens up 6, and we're down to like 4.5 in some spots. I don't buy that.
Yeah, I'm on the Rams because I'm with you. I think I do put a little more credence into the letdown factor, but I think that's what would drive the Cardinal bet here, is that the Rams gonna have a letdown after the big game against the Bucs.
Yeah,
and I do think that's overrated in the NFL as well. And I do think the Rams are legitimately good, and I think the Rams are scary to a lot of people because they do things different, right? They don't send guys to the Senior Bowl anymore. They just get the video and. And so everybody, I think there's a little bit of the industry wanting to say the Rams, it's like the Tampa Bay Rays. Like, you talk to people in baseball, the Rays think they're the smartest guys in the room. Yeah, I think they probably are, right? Like, somebody's the smartest guy in the room. And with no payroll, they keep kicking everybody's ass. It's like, well, they haven't won a World Series. Yeah, but they spend, 15% of what everybody else does. And yet there they are in the World Series, right? Like, somehow, because they haven't won the 7th game, like, somehow, like, we don't validate the fact that they have overcome immense odds. And I think the Rams, while they're not overcoming like a payroll disparity, they're doing things differently. I think there's a natural pushback. They're trading away all their draft picks. I mean, that's something that did work back when what's the name, the Washington general manager, Bobby Beathard. He traded away all his first round picks for years. And Washington, with Joe Gibbs, won 3 different Super Bowls. And then the draft became then along came Jimmy Johnson, and there was, he made the big move for Herschel Walker. It's like, draft picks are everything, right? There was like, it swung too far that draft picks didn't matter because the Redskins had done this. And then Jimmy Johnson came along, and now it means everything. Well, it's been all about draft picks, and the Rams are saying, you know what? Stars win games. We're going to get him and we'll piece the rest of it together. And that's not how other people are doing business. So I think there's a little bit of wow, they do it differently. It must be wrong. And I'm always open to the idea when somebody does it differently that they might be ahead of the curve. Matt Stafford, I'm going to tell you, there are people in the league that have told me he's an absolute coach killer and he sucks and he can't rise to the challenge. He has so far.
Mm-hmm.
And while the Lions gave him weapons, like, they put a lot of receivers and draft picks into running backs and everything, I don't know that they ever had the coach right. I think the coach is right, coupled with the arm talent. I think the market is going to say the Rams should let down. And so I'm open to the idea that the Rams are the best team in the NFC and that they're smarter than most kids in the room right now. So I'll take the Rams right here.
I'm ready to start fading the Niners. It sounds weird off a game that they, competed really well down the stretch and had the lead. If not for Rodgers with his big comeback, I don't know, man. I'm getting fed up with the freaking genuflecting at the feed, bowing at the feet, a little shanty. That's enough. And the other thing is there's only so much he can do to overcome Jimmy G. Like, I think he's an average guy. Now there's spots tough though, because the Seahawks have a lot of flaws, and this is a public play because right now, if you look at the numbers, like 80% of the cash and like 65% of the tickets are on Seattle. But I'm taking Seattle plus the 3.
So I agree with the sentiment that the time is coming potentially to play against San Francisco. I was on Green Bay. I had Green Bay in the contest on Sunday, but I don't think it's this week. And this is only because I'm very anti-Seattle. Like, this is going to be the 3rd consecutive week I bet against Seattle. I think this is a team that the market has not caught up with how poor their secondary is, how poor they are defensively. PFF had it. I'll have to get the exact percentage, but I do know this. Seattle, how about this? I'm going to word this because I can't remember the wording exactly, but essentially was Seattle leads the league in terms of looks shown pre-snap actually playing it, right? Like, they don't disguise anything. It's a basic defense. There's nothing going on. They have no edge rushers in any way whatsoever. And this has been, for me, it's been confusing to see the market overwhelmingly support this team on a week-to-week basis. They did it week 2 against Tennessee, driving them up to 6.5. They did it last week, putting them up as high as 2-point favorites against Minnesota. And you mentioned it, Steve, again here. If you look at some of the numbers and where this market is going, again in this week, betting on them on the road against San Francisco. I just don't know if the market has realized how bad the Seattle team is. So my standpoint comes from a purely anti-Seattle standpoint.
Right.
So I think I'm going to use San Francisco this week. And I think to play against the San Francisco 49ers, the time is coming. I just don't think it's going to be against a poor Seattle team, in my opinion.
And to back up your defensive thing real quick, I think I saw the number correctly that I think it was the Chargers and someone else, whatever they're doing pre-snap on defense, they only go with that 60% of the time. And the Seahawks, whatever they show on defense pre-snap, they're going with it 90% of the time. Like they don't.
That was it. Yep.
They don't move.
Right. That was
they
it.
don't change it. So that is kind of interesting.
Yeah, like I have a really low opinion of this team, like overall for Seattle. I think the market still looks at them and thinks, hey, Russell Wilson and a solid defense. It's just not the case anymore.
Shanahan never stole my lunch money, so I am not about sour on Shanahan. I think he's a tremendous play caller. I'm not sold 100% on that he's got all the pieces when it comes to the head coaching part of the equation. I do think there's some things that he maybe leaves on the table from time to time. If you ask me to quantify it right now, I don't know. Like that might be just, talk show speak, right? Like for it. But I think the guy can game plan, and I'm with you. I think Seattle's defense has got problems, and I think he'll hose the Seattle defense. And I like the Niners. I don't understand why this is moving down.
I will say that I do think the Seattle secondary, the San Francisco secondary has their own problems, right? They're really banged up. You lose Verrett for the year. Like that's going to be an issue. You saw it, by the way, when you give up a drive for a field goal in 35 seconds to allow Aaron Rodgers to win that game. So there's the chance that the explosive plays for Seattle are there and, they cover that number and they eventually win. But I'm just, I'm one of those guys that I do it a lot in the NBA because the season's longer. When you find angles, you can really pound them. If you remember last year, there was that stretch where your Nets, Steve, covered, I think it was 13 out of 14 games. I was on them for 12 of them because the market just didn't catch up with how good they were. It was the same thing. I think it's the same thing here. I'm going to play against Seattle until it blows up in my face.
All the money and tickets, majority, are on Baltimore against Denver. We keep saying Denver's overrated. And yet the number's moving towards Denver. Broncos are 1.5 now.
I would love to get your thoughts on this because I agree with the sentiment that the Broncos have not been tested. But this isn't the same Ravens team as we have seen the last couple of years, right? Like those two things work together, right? Like Baltimore just got done scuffling with the Detroit Lions, right? They lost, and granted, it was 2 fumbles and all that stuff against the Raiders. They lost that game. Like they haven't looked anywhere near the dominant team that beat up on the bad teams in the past. And so while I understand the sentiment that Denver is not as good as we think they are we sure that the Baltimore Ravens are the team that's really going to test that theory?
John, what do you think of teasing the Broncos?
They're minus 1.5. So if they were catching points, that would be it. But since you're not getting through any like multiple key numbers in that regard, it's generally not valuable to tease through 0.
Right. So I like the Broncos in this game. I do think that this is a general public game where everybody's the 0-9 of their opponents is being quoted and quoted and quoted. I said it earlier. I think their roster is really good everywhere but quarterback. Bridgewater just needs to manage the game. He's got weapons. He's got better weapons. Yeah, I'm not going to say better weapons than he had at New Orleans when New Orleans was the height of their powers, but he's got those kind of weapons in Denver. He's got multiple running backs. He's got multiple wide receivers. He's got an athletic tight end. He's got an offensive line that they've invested quite a bit in. That's got some athleticism. So I do like the Broncos, and I think the Ravens, while they got by the Lions and they got the win against the Chiefs, I think they're a little bit of a flawed team. I don't think they're as good as they've been in the past. I think they're at the end of their rope. All the injuries, no one's talking about it anymore because they beat the Chiefs, they beat the Lions, but I think that's real. I think Vic Fangio will be overly conservative. He'll take field goals instead of going for 4th and 1s. He won't go for 2s. Like he'll make those mistakes, but I actually think the Broncos are the equal to the Ravens, and I don't think the quarterback differential is that big if the Broncos can stop the run. And I think they've got the personnel to do that. And so I'll take the Broncos.
And I think there's
one of the things, John. I'm sorry. My point about the tees.
Yeah,
I think this is a field goal game either way, right? Because Vic Fangio is going to keep people in the game, and I don't know that the Ravens can throw knockout punches right now. So I think it'll be a field goal game. So I know it doesn't go through the key numbers, but I actually think that you may be watching one team line up a field goal to win it, and if you tease either team, you could be in a good spot. But I like the Broncos in this game.
Well, yeah, and if that's your line of thinking, like if you project to be a field goal game, then the strategy would be tease Baltimore up to 7.5, right? Because then you get your 7.5, you get through your key numbers and all that. And I'll say this too, about the 0-9 and all the bad tees. That's all really true. But there are certain things about the Broncos, what they're doing, that seem to be sustainable. Like Teddy Bridgewater, PFF has that adjusted completion percentage where it's literally just pure accuracy, like how on target your balls are. He's the second leading quarterback in that category behind Kirk Cousins. He's thrived in this kind of a system so far to this point. Like those little things are translatable against a secondary that's been really baited up. So like I think everything's true about like considering the Broncos to be somewhat fraudulent. I just don't know if the Ravens, after what we've seen through 3 weeks, are the team that's going to be like, yep, they're the ones that are going to expose them.
By the way, I want to be clear. Steve Cofield's balls have proven to not be accurate.
Mine are too accurate. I got number 2 on the way in December.
I was going to say, in my case, is that a bad thing?
No.
I would argue they're incredibly accurate. Yeah. I'm childless. I accomplished exactly what I wanted to.
Having been married both times, I was able, to have a shot. I'm 2 for 2, right?
Yeah.
So 16 years of wedded bliss, every day better than the last.
Green Bay is 6.5. Are we all ready to say Pittsburgh just sucks? They're just a 6 or 7 win team, maybe 8. What we all said about Big Ben, that he's washed, is true. And maybe Tomlin and company don't get it, that like he's not going to save you, so you can't have him throw 58 freaking times.
Yeah.
But they can't run. The offensive line sucks, right? Like that's what's really different about the Steeler team. When they had TJ Watt, people want to be like, the steel curtain, it's there, the defense. We'll see what kind of shape he's in, moving forward. But yeah, Roethlisberger does suck. I mean, he's one of the worst graded quarterbacks on PFF. The arm strength isn't there anymore. I think the weapons were overrated that he has. I hear people say, they got Claypool and Deontay Johnson and all this. I'm not ready to go there on the weapons, but I definitely think he is a liability. And I think they become a hard team to find a spot because their name recognition always gives them a little juice. And I think it's going to be a little while before the odds makers are ready to just walk away from the Steelers as pure mediocrity.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And on top of that, very quietly, the Steelers defense, to add to Soren's point, their secondary is not good. They have the 3rd worst coverage grade in the National Football League by PFF standards. They have given up a lot of big plays. Like that's going to be an issue, especially if TJ Watt's not going to be there to cover up a lot of those blemishes with how good he really is. So I think that's going to be a problem against Green Bay. As we know, they like to take their shots downfield with Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, like all of those guys. They're going to be able to test that. So Green Bay to me is the other teaser leg, right? That's going to get up to 7, 7.5. You can tease that back down. A Packers-Falcons teaser is going to be on the card for me this weekend. Getting that key number in a team at home. I don't like the Steelers team at all.
Buccaneers in New England, I think my better play is probably on the under 49, but I'll lean Patriots. I don't think they're going to get blown off the field in this game, and they're getting 6.5, 7.
Why do you like the under?
Because I think it's what the Patriots are going to try to accomplish. Patriots might not score, right? They might completely flop offensively. They might not score, but I don't think they're going to get rolled for friggin' 30-plus points because I think Belichick's going to try to dink and dunk with Mac Jones and take the air out of the ball.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. What are the Patriots?
What do you mean? Who are they?
Like what are at the end of the year, the record's what?
I think they're a 500 team. But I think, Belichick is going to be driven to come up with a good game plan here. Do I dare say that Brady might be like too amped up for the game? That's kind of crazy, right? It's a little crazy. I'm not going to say that, but it is going to be he's going to be fucking fired up.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think when it comes to the total, my one worry would be, Steve, so they've gone over the total in all 3 games up to this point, and part of it is their offense, right? Their offense is spectacular, and Tom Brady's leading candidate for MVP. their secondary is not good, and it's really beat up. They lost Jamel Dean on Sunday, right? What's his name? Sean Murphy Bunting with the elbow bone sticking out on Thursday night, week 1, right? They're really thin at secondary, and I think I can't remember the name of their third corner who's got a rib injury. He's been on the injury report every single week. But this has quietly been like a secondary that's been beat up, and they've been thrashed for like 3 weeks now by some quarterbacks.
Here's the thing: I don't think that Belichick and McDaniels will try to push the ball down the field. So I think everything's going to be underneath. I don't think they're going to get destroyed for a ton of yardage and a ton of big plays.
So I'll pull this up because I actually just wrote about this week because Stafford killed him downfield for a couple of big. Deshaun Jackson got behind that secondary like 4 times. Then Stafford only found him twice. That was a really big part of it, but it's actually been on the short and intermediate stuff that they've been getting destroyed on. Let's see, I've got this in my write-up. Hold on, give me 1 second as I scroll through all of this.
While you're looking for that, let me ask this: does anybody think? Look, Belichick has always said the season begins in October, and he's always kind of used the month of September as kind of his preseason. And I think he's a counterpuncher by trade. And Andy Reid said the other day, he doesn't say much, but he said, really, the first 3 weeks are tough because you don't have any film on anybody. And I think Andy Reid's got a lot of Bill Belichick in him. And so I think Belichick's always at a disadvantage. We now have 3 games, so he's got some film, and I think he's ready to start counterpunching. It might be a week early. But also, how big is this game? Do we actually believe that Belichick may have sandbagged a little bit leading up to this because this game is personal and he unleashes fury on this one?
I don't know, but that would be awesome. It would be so good if they're just like 5 wide receiver sets and Mac Jones is just like slinging for like 400 yards and it's just incredible. It would be so cool. I think it would be the coolest thing ever.
I'm open to that being a possibility.
So I have the numbers too, by the way. So Matt Stafford, Steve, 14 to 17, 132 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt on throws, 0 to 9 yards downfield. Dak Prescott, 80.3 passing grade on throws, 0 to 9 yards downfield that Thursday, 26 to 32, 202 yards, 1 touchdown. He also had 5 big-time throws, 10 or more yards downfield. That's a little bit farther down. And then how about this? Matt Ryan on medium throws, 10 to 19 yards. He had he was perfect on all 6 of his throws with a PFF passing grade of 92.4. those are troubling. And especially with Stafford, it was 1 step out, 3 steps out. And that's the thing that is kind of allowed all those games to go over the total. So I don't know how live it makes the Patriots, but I do think it makes it opens the door a little bit more for a higher scoring game than we expect.
Good stuff. All right. Monday Night Football. Probably a big crowd of Raiders fans in LA. As our buddy JT the Brick suggested, Charger fans are actually kind of afraid to go to their own game with the Raiders fans around, which I kind of buy. LA Raider fans. We had Tim Brown on Monday and he started laughing. He's like, the LA Raider fans are a little bit different than Las Vegas and even Oakland. He's like, get ready. So anyway, there's going to be a lot. It's going to be a Raiders home game essentially at SoFi. Chargers right now are 3.5.
I like this Raiders team a lot. I legitimately like their offense. We talked about it, right? We opened the show with it. I have an MVP ticket on Carr. But at the same time, as we talked about some of these defensive flaws that could potentially pop up, if they're going to pop up in an ugly way, it would be against the Chargers in this spot. Who's the corner they lost to injury? Whose name's escaping me? Steve, on Sunday against Miami Dolphins. They lost a corner, the Raiders did. But regardless, I don't know if he's going to be healthy. Let's go back to check the injury report. I'll get his name. He's their better corner. But regardless.
Trayvon Mullen?
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Mullen. What's his status? Because that's a big question for me, right? If they're going to get exposed, this is going to be the game in which they get exposed, and it could get pretty ugly.
I think.
By the way, I got to mention real quick. Wow, top 5 fantasy wide receiver, not Keenan Allen. How about Mike Williams, Soren?
Yeah,
Mike Williams.
Yeah, no. How about pass? That was Mike Hughes, former first-round pick of the Vikings, who the Chiefs had gotten through 2 weeks, was grading top 20 corner, and he just got worked by Mike Williams, who, by the way, can't run. So that was of note and exposed because they take and it'll be interesting to see if they change things up. They take L'Jarius Sneed, who starts on the outside, and then he moves into nickel when Hughes comes in, and Hughes stays outside. Part of that's because they love Sneed as a blitzer. And I just think, they like big bodied corners. And so it's, the smaller slot guys, Snead's the better athlete, but Mike Hughes got worked over by Mike Williams. It was not pretty. I actually, don't you think that everybody is ready to bring the Raiders back to the pack? And don't you, I feel like, and the tickets reflect this, 80% of the cash, 63% of the tickets on the Chargers. That seems too easy to me, right? Chargers at home. I like the Raiders. I think the Raiders have something going. I think undefeated teams die hard. And I think there's something too, when you've got something rolling, like you want to keep it rolling. And I'll take the Raiders.
John, where are you going?
Particularly with the 3 in the hook. Like right now I get 3.5.
Right.
I'm not going to bet it personally, but if you're telling me pick one or the other, it would be the Raiders. Like I think their offense is legitimately good. Yeah, the run blocking and the run numbers aren't really great, but Carr is good enough and those weapons are good enough that they're going to be a problem for any defense that they face. To me, it's just twofold. It's one, that offensive line from a pass blocking perspective has not graded very well, and Carr has had to work some magic in some possessions, and Joey Bosa is going to be kind of a problem. And on the flip side, if your secondary is beat up and your pass rush isn't as dominant because you're not taking on one of the worst offensive lines in the league, can you get a stop against the Los Angeles Chargers? I think those would be my questions. But I think ultimately I agree with Soren that, the market has moved against the Raiders in almost every single one of these games, right? Like Monday night was a popular spot against Baltimore because it was their first home game, so they got support there. Line got brought up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dolphins as well, the market was on them too, and they get that late back, I guess call it a backdoor, but the touchdown at the waning seconds to get in the number. I think the market has been trying to take a shot against the Raiders, and they're doing it again here, and they've been wrong to it. Well, they covered, but you understand what I'm saying.
I'll say this. I don't think the Chargers put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks, and their run defense is god-awful. Yeah. So if the Raiders with Peyton Barber have an ability to force everybody to play the run, then I think that opens up their passing game even more. And I think John Gruden has embraced the modern NFL. And I think from a standpoint of
when you send your kicker out on second down, or you're just playing for a field goal at the end of overtime, it's not exactly the modern NFL.
I will grant you that, but I will say from the standpoint of he's not afraid to look down at the rushing statistics and only see 34 yards rushing. Yeah, right. Like he like the idea. I think he's embraced the throw to win, run when you're winning, and I think that standpoint. I think he's a pretty good play caller. I think he's had enough time to get back in sync with what's going on in the league. I think they've invested quite a bit with the weapons. I think they're a tough team to match, and I think defensively they're a lot better. They're in sound hands. They're not going to wet themselves. And I'm still Staley had only gone for 1 4th down before the game against the Chiefs. He went for 3 against Kansas City. I think it was 2 full 1. He feared Patrick Mahomes getting the football back. And by the way, they converted 2 of them. You're going to see on the stats, they only went for 1. They actually went for 3. They converted 1 on a penalty, which doesn't count as a 4th down conversion. And they had a penalty against them, which they then ended up punting. So that also didn't go as a 4th down play. And the other one was the one everyone saw in SportsCenter where 4th and 4 penalty, went for it again on 4th and 9 and converted it. But he only went for it once in the first 2 games. I don't think he's actually that aggressive. And I think he did it because the Chiefs defense sucks and because he fears Patrick Mahomes most of all. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens here. But I like the Raiders. I think this is a spot where the general public is looking for a loss for the Raiders, and I like rolling undefeated teams. I think undefeated teams have success. I know that goes in the face of what we said about Carolina, but I don't think Carolina is near as good as the Raiders.
John, what's going on at VSiN? Tell people what's happening lately.
Let's see. I'm back on the air every day, Monday through Friday, just an hour, 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. So you can watch me and Matt Humans on The Edge at those times. I'm also doing our opening line show, which is Sunday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific time. First look at the next week of NFL action. All those openers, we get our first look at them, and I help look ahead, both NFL and college, by the way. So it's not just NFL related. And also, I have been working over the last 2 or 3 weeks on the NBA guide because the NBA is already starting in less than a month. So got all that looked forward to, too.
John's awesome on the NBA. Soren does shows the rest of the week. That's all he's going to say. He doesn't know.
You can check out our podcast.
He gets very confused. But yes, do pimp your podcast.
Yeah, the Too Deep is more of an NFL minded one. We record those on Thursday nights. We're starting to stream them like this. live starting this week, and our Red, White, and True is a Chiefs podcast we do on Tuesday nights. We did it live right before this one, so you can check that out wherever you get your podcasts. If you're a Chiefs fan, if you're an NFL fan, Eric Eager from Pro Football Focus and Jeff Chadia from the NFL Network do those with me, and then 810WHB.com if you want to check out the radio show and you're not in Kansas City.
If you're in Vegas, I'm at Rampart at the Sportsbook tomorrow with Silver Sevens on Thursday. Tomorrow, I think I'm going to give away some Vegas Golden Knights tickets for the exhibition game coming up on October 7th. So if you're on the west side, stop in. The Rampart's pretty cool. They got the good deli there. So stop in. I forgot the name of the restaurant. I was gonna pop the other restaurant, but I forgot the name of it. So
good call.
What are you going to do?
I think it's Sam Donaldson's place, isn't it?
It might be Sam Donaldson's place. I have at this point, we're on the road at so many different casinos and bars. I can't remember the name of every nook and cranny of Rampart, but I'll have that tomorrow on air. So I promise, Rampart. Sorry.
I'm sure they appreciate it.
That's it. Oh,